Hello, McFluffy52 here, and today I want to take you through Magic Timmy's top uncommons and the commons. Top 10 uncommons, top 10 commons, and then we'll go through our ranking of all the cards together from 1 to 20. So starting off with Botanical Brawler. This card is amazing if you're going to be playing +1/+1 counters because it's 2 mana, trample. Botanical Brawler enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on another permanent you control, if it is the first time +1/+1 counters have been put on that permanent this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Botanical Brawler. Now, we're getting a +1/+1 counter sub-theme or theme here in March of the Machines, or March of the Machine, and Botanical Brawler is one of the best cards for this because, well, think of playing this with like Defiler Vigor. I think it will be crazy with Defiler Vigor because Defiler Vigor says whenever you cast a green permanent card, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So each creature you control gets a +1/+1 counter, and then Botanical Brawler sees that you're putting one or more +1/+1 counters on another permanent you control, and it gets a +1 counter for each time you put a +1 counter on all of those other creatures. So Botanical Brawler kind of explodes in power and toughness, getting one plus the number of other creatures you have +1/+1 counters onto it. And then it also natively has trample, so it's able to just get through there. It is limited to once per turn per permanent, but this is not really a huge limitation because, like Query on Beastcaller, yeah, you could, if you cast out multiple creatures, you're gonna get more than one +1/+1 counter here to put on Botanical Brawler, but still, it should grow and it should just be a pretty awesome threat, curving out from 2 as long as you're playing it in a +1/+1 counter deck. Next up, we have Invasion of Amonkhet. I think this card is good value if you're playing Dimir. So 3 mana, when Invasion of Amonkhet enters the battlefield, each player mills 3 cards, then each opponent discards a card and you draw a card. So just good stuff on the front side. Milling you and your opponent might be relevant, A, if you're playing a mill strategy, or B, if you're trying to go ahead and flip Shieldred, the new Praetor. I talk about all the Praetors in my Praetors ranking video, and I mentioned some of them in my Mythics rank, or Mythic top 10 Timmy's top 10 Mythics or whatever. There will be links to those videos in the description, but Invasion of Amonkhet works well with that, but it also works well with the backside of Invasion of Amonkhet. If you can remove its 4 defense counters, you get Lazotep Convert. You may have Lazotep Convert enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature card in a graveyard except it's a 4/4 black zombie in addition to its other types. So say like the opponent has Atraxa in their graveyard, you get a 4/4 like copy of Atraxa that ETBs, which is super cool. It's important to note how it's phrased. You do get like the enter the battlefield trigger here. So if you mill your opponent's Atraxa, or they're planning to reanimate Atraxa and you're able to flip this battle, maybe you get a 4/4 ETB. But yeah, the front side, pretty good. The back side is certainly not bad to flip. Next up, Invasion of Ergamon. Uses 2 mana, Gruul, 5 defense counters. When Invasion of Ergamon enters the battlefield, create a treasure token, then you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So this is 2 mana ramp that can also filter your hand, and it also like puts it in your graveyard. So it could work in like a reanimator or graveyard, like synergy type deck. But 1 card discarded into your graveyard maybe isn't like the most competitive card for that. There are other cards that will like Fatal the Mirror, you discard 2 cards, you draw 2, so you're filling your graveyard up a little bit faster. But what really excites me about this card is its 2 mana ramp. Now, I don't know if you all remember Prosperous Innkeeper. I think it was primarily played because, well, it's 2 mana, it creates a treasure token, so it fixes your mana. This fixes your mana and your hand, and treasure tokens, they're not really worthwhile for your opponent to remove. It's not like a mana dork as well, so it's not easy because like people are flinging around creature removal like nuts. So treasure sitting on the battlefield, helping you to cast a 4/4 on your next turn, or sorry, a 4 mana spell on your next turn is super awesome. If you flip this card, you get Truga Cliff Charger, which is a 3/4 with trample. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, search your library, for a land or battle card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. So you can then go ahead and find another battle if you want to go ahead and Invasion of Ergamon again, or you have like Invasion of Alara, say. So you flip this, you find up your Invasion of Alara, and you play Invasion of Alara, you get a bunch of value. So there are some fun battles in this set. We talked about Invasion of Alara in the Rares video, but yeah, Invasion of Ergamon, 2 mana ramp, fixes your hand, and yeah, allows you to play a four cost spell in turn 3, which is nice. Next up, Invasion of Pyrulea. This is 2 mana, Simic, 4 defense counters. When it enters the battlefield, scry 3 and then reveal the top card of your library. It's a land or a double face card and then draw a card. So can sort of read like, what is it? It sort of reads like scry 2, draw a land or a DFC or a double face card, which seems pretty decent. And then if you're able to flip it, you get Gargantuan Slabhorn, which is a 4/4 with Trample and Ward 2. Other transformed permanents you control have Trample and Ward 2, which is nice. So like, I think this card is probably a bit sleeper here because of the amount of DFCs or double face cards that are running around. Think of like Fable the Mirrorbreaker, Kamigawa, Neon Dynasty, on top of all these other battles. I really do think this card has potential as just a really nice 2/2 in Simic. So yeah, scry 2, draw the land or a DFC doesn't seem bad. And then maybe you flip this and you get a 4/4. Not bad. Next up, you have Khenra Spellspear. This card is cool. It is 2 mana for a 2/2 with Trample and Prowess. Now, so this is good in sort of like a Spellslinger deck. You can pay 3 mana, a blue or 2 life to transform it, and you get Gitaxian Spellstalker, which is a 3/3 with Trample, so you get a power and toughness upgrade. Keeps the Trample, it gains Ward 2, and it gains an extra Prowess. So Prowess. That's kind of crazy. This seems super good in sort of any Spellslinger if you can get it to stick around and then flip it. Granted, it doesn't have haste, right? So it's not quite like Monastery Swift Spear, play it on 1, swing it in and everything. But if you can flip this, you get Trample, Ward 2, Prowess. So if you play one spell, you get a 5/5 Trampler with Ward 2, or if you play 2 spells, it becomes a 7/7. 3 spells, it becomes a 9/9 Trampler. So this seems like a good punch in for a ton of damage if you're able to flip it, get it to stick around, and cast some spells. Should be fun to play. We'll see how it performs. Marshal of Zhalfir is my next uncommon. It's a 1 white, 1 blue for a 2/2 human knight. Other knights you control have +1/+1. So we have a Azorius Knights theme in March of Machines, and this is a nice lord for it because it's uncommon, and then I think it's kind of relevant that it has this 2 mana ability that says tap another target creature. So usually you don't want to attack in with your lords, so this actually seems like a pretty good ability. So instead of like attacking in and forcing the opponent to block this card with one of their creatures, you can instead just tap down a creature, so it still sort of trades in combat that way, or like has an impact on combat in that way, because you're able to tap down a creature and go ahead and swing in with all your other knights. So I think this card should be a ton of fun to play or try out in our Knights deck that we're going to be getting as part of like March of the Machines. Render Inert is the next uncommon I have. 3 mana, and then you get to remove 5 counters from target permanent, draw a card. Now, part of what excites me for this card is because it can kill planeswalkers, incubate tokens, and flip battles. So 5 is a lot of counters to remove. Most battles have 5 or less defense counters, so this can flip mostly any battle for 3 mana, and then, oh, you get to draw a card on top of it. So it also has that potential flexibility besides playing this because you're playing like some interesting battle like synergy deck. You can also hit planeswalkers with this, or the incubate token. So incubate's a new mechanic from March of the Machines where you get these tokens that are 0 and 0, or like have 0 power and toughness, but they get +1/+1 counter. So you remove those +1/+1 counters, that creature's dead. So Render Inert seems good. in those situations, especially fun for if you're trying to get some of those high value battle backsides. Next up, we have Sandstalker Moloch, 3 mana, 2 green, 4/2 with flash. When Sandstalker Moloch enters the battlefield, if an opponent casts a blue and or black spell this turn, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a permanent card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this card is super exciting because, well, 3 mana, 4/2 flash should hopefully cut down or surprise your opponents, and it also doesn't die to cut down. So like it has a cumulative power and toughness over 5. Cut down is one of the like top 2 cards played in standard right now. This dodges it. It also, if your opponent's playing black or blue, you get this massive upside where you can go ahead, replace the Sandstalker Moloch in your hand, looking at the top 4, which is nice because that's deeper than your like typical anticipate type effects, and you get to put a permanent, so you can replace it with another creature or a land. Presumably you're playing a fair amount of creatures, battles, enchantments, lands that are your permanent spells. So yeah, this card should be a ton of fun to play. It's part of the hate cycle that appeared in March of the Machines, and maybe this will help put green on the map as part of March of the Machines. Next up, we have Sculpted Perfection. This is 4 mana for basically a Phyrexian Anthem. It's an enchantment that says when it enters the battlefield, incubate 2. Again, incubate its mechanic creates an incubator token with 2+1/+1 counters, and then you can pay 2 generic mana to transform it into an 0/0. So it becomes basically a 2/2 if you flip it. And then it says Phyrexians you control get +1/+1. So this isn't the best spell in terms of like cheap Anthem effects. It's not like a 2 mana Lord. It's not a 3 mana just like Anthem, but you technically get like a body with it that can turn into a 3/3. And Phyrexians are super well supported as part of the set. We got a bunch of new Phyrexian creatures like Grafted Butcher, which is the amazing 2 mana Phyrexian Lord that was part of this set. We talked about it in the Rares video, but this seems like a good card to include in that Phyrexian deck if you're striving for more Anthem type effects, pumping up your board. You also technically still do get a creature with it. Lastly, for our uncommons, I believe this is the last one, we have Surge of Salvation. Now this card is crazy. 1 white, it's an instant. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Prevent all damage that black and or red searches would deal to creatures you control this turn. So the first part, not even the color hate part, this is again part of that color hate cycle that we were talking about, white hating on black and red here. But the first text, without even the hate cycle part of it in it, is amazing. You and permanents you control gain hexproof. This is super flexible protection. So you can protect, like, oh, they're going to use targeted removal on your creature. Well, cast Surge of Salvation. They're going to use targeted removal on your planeswalker. Oops, cast Surge of Salvation. Oh, they're trying to remove your wedding announcement. Oops, Surge of Salvation. Like, this protects any sort of targeted removal on any of your things, which is awesome. And then it gives you hexproof. So, well, opponent goes to cast Invoke Despair. Invoke Despair says target opponent. You gain hexproof. You can't become the target of things if you have hexproof. So this will like if your opponent casts Invoke Despair and you cast Surge of Salvation, it will fizzle the Invoke Despair. So this card is amazing in that regard. As like black is one of the most dominant colors in standard right now, and Surge of Salvation can help fix that if you're playing white, which white is like one of the second most dominant color, or maybe even the most dominant color in standard right now. So white might be on top now with Surge of Salvation as a solid card, not only for just the first text, but you also get this prevent all damage that black or red sources would deal to creatures you control this turn. So if opponent casts a Brotherhood's End, well, cast a little Surge of Salvation, my creatures don't get hit by that sweeper. It's important to note it says creatures you control, so if you think you're gonna like prevent like Shieldred attacking into your face, it says creatures, you will still take damage, but still can do some like interesting blocking combat trick shenanigans with that second part of this card. Alright, sorry. Moving on to our commons. Let me actually fix the text here. Jumping around. Top 10 commons. The first one I want to talk about is Atraxa's Fall. Now, this card is kind of like an interesting upgrade. We've always had sort of like 2 mana naturalize, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Well, Atraxa's Fall is fun because it says destroy target artifact, battle, enchantment, or creature with flying. It's 2 mana, but it's sorcery speed. So I think this card seems pretty good. Again, I've mentioned this in the other videos, and like the mythics, the praetors, the rares. I think there will be a fair amount of flyers running around in the upcoming standard. So 2 mana to destroy a flying creature in green, that's pretty awesome. You can snipe that artifact or enchantment that's being a problem, not bad. It is sorcery speed, that is probably the weakest part of this card, and then also if your opponent's threatening to flip a battle, you can go ahead and destroy that battle. Important to note, if you destroy a battle, it does not defeat the battle, it does not remove the counters from the battle, so it does not flip the battle. So they don't get the backside. You can't cast this on your own battles hoping to flip them. This simply destroys the battle. Most battles have an ETB effect, so it's really only relevant if your opponent's going to flip it. If you're worried about your opponent flipping a battle, then you would cast Atraxa's Fall on it. But yeah, Atraxa's Fall, the first common that I would like to talk about. Blighted Burgeoning. Now this is the second common that I would like to talk about. It's 3 mana for an enchantment aura. Enchant land. When Blighted Burgeoning enters the battlefield, incubate 2. When enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of any color. So this is 2 mana enchantment or land enchantment ramp, which you might be like, oh, why would I play this over like any of the other ramp options? I could play a 2 mana mana dork. Now, why? I'm going to try and sell you on Blighted Burgeoning here because I think it's pretty cool. But this is better because, okay, first off, creatures die. Your opponent is going to cast removal on your mana dork. This doesn't die. So that's the first thing. Second thing is this fixes your mana color as well. This is better than just like tutoring up basics. This can be any mana color whenever you want it. It says whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional mana, 1 mana of any color. So it adds additional mana, which is cool. And then the next thing is you can, if you have 4 lands, what you can do is you can tap 3 lands and then play this Blighted Burgeoning on your 4th land, and it's the same as like paying 3 mana to tutor up an untapped land. So then you can go ahead and tap that remaining land for 1 mana and then the additional mana, so you get 2 mana, so then you can cast one more thing. This card is also cool. One of the things that I think about that's cool for this card is enter the battlefield, incubate 2. So you can, if you have 4 lands, you play this on the 4th land, and then you tap that land to generate 2 mana, you flip the incubate token. Now, what's really nice about having that flipped incubate token is your opponent casts Invoke Despair. Invoke Despair eats that incubate token, it eats your Blighted Burgeoning. Yeah, that's kind of sad. But if they use Invoke Despair on your Blighted Burgeoning and your creature token, they're not drawing cards and doing as much damage, which is relevant. How many times have you seen your opponent cast Invoke Despair, they draw 3, of course they draw into another Invoke Despair, and then they cast that Invoke Despair, they chain them together, you're crying, you're weeping, you're on the floor. It's a tragedy. Blighted Burgeoning is cool because it can eat those Invoke Despair triggers while also still being a pretty good ramp spell that dodges sort of creature removal. It also gives you a body. And also, lastly, what I like about land enchantment like ramp is if you have cards, like there is 2 creatures that are going to be in standard that can untap lands, then it gets even more explosive. So you play this on a land, you can tap the land for 2 mana, and then you can untap the land and then tap it for 2 mana again. So this is better than just tutoring up 1 land and then untapping and tapping that. You get more mana this way. And we have, I think it's called Portent Tracker, is a 2 mana 1/1 satyr from March of the Machine that you can tap it to untap target land, And you can also tap it to add or remove loyalty counters from battles. Or sorry, not loyalty counters, defense counters from battles. So if it's your battle, you can remove a counter. If it's an opponent's battle, you can add a counter. So something like this, like something like that would work well with Blighted Burgeoning because then you can tap, untap, and generate a ton of mana. So that's Blighted Burgeoning. Next up, Cosmic Hunger. This is just a green bite spell, but it's got an upgrade because it can hit creatures, planeswalkers, or battles. So now you can go ahead and bite spell your battles and flip them. So, yep, that's Cosmic Hunger. That's as simple as it gets. Next up, Cut Short. This is 3 mana, instant speed white removal for planeswalkers and creatures. So the way it works is it has Convoke. So if you have a bunch of creatures, you can go ahead and tap those creatures to generate or pay for Cut Short. And then it says destroy target planeswalker that was activated this turn or tapped creature. Do I think this removal spell is the best in the world? No, but I think it's a very interesting option that white is getting in this particular set, that it can hit both planeswalkers and creatures. So if your opponent goes ahead to tack in with something, well, you can convoke this in for free after blocking, because you just like set up your creatures to block, they're untapped, you convoke, you tap them after they've blocked, and then you can remove the unblocked creature. Or if the opponent, like, they play Wandering Emperor and then they take it up, well, Cut Short, usually your opponent's always going to be activating their planeswalkers once before you can remove them, so Cut Short is nice because, well, it can still get them in those situations. So I don't know if you lose out a whole ton not having the ability to do it exactly whenever you want, but I think Cut Short is definitely an interesting one. I don't think it's going to replace current removal in Standard, but is notable. Next up is Final Flourish, talking about notable removal that might not get played. Final Flourish I think is super cool because red and black got a sack theme in this set, and this works with that. So 2 mana, kicker, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. If the spell was kicked, that creature gets -6/-6 until end of turn. So this can be instant speed 2 mana removal for a sack deck without even sacking anything if it's a small creature, or if it's a large creature like a Shieldred, you go ahead, sack a creature, gets -6/-6, go ahead and remove it. So I think that the fact that it's instant speed, which sack has it sorcery speed removal for 1 mana, that can destroy creatures or planeswalkers. But at sorcery speed is a major downgrade for sack, in my opinion, because, well, opponent might be going to remove one of your things, you can sacrifice it in response, and then you get this upgraded removal spell. So I think the same thing applies to one of the cards that are going to be coming up here. If you think of like Village Rites, sack a creature in response, draw 2 cards. If you can respond to opponent's removal, that sacrifice cost doesn't really become that big of a burden. So next, Unseal Necropolis, or Unseal the Necropolis for 3 mana. It's an instant that says each player mills 3 cards. Then you return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a great way to go ahead, recur creatures, or potentially draw into a creature. If you mill 3 cards, you might hit a creature and you can draw it. So it's sort of 3 mana, draw 2 cards, not bad. Fills your graveyard, fills the opponent's graveyard. So if you're playing Shieldred and you want to flip it into the True Scriptures, I think it's called, the Saga on the backside, you need 8 cards in the opponent's graveyard, and so this can help you fill up your opponent's graveyard. Also can help fill up your opponent's graveyard, or your graveyard if you're trying to reanimate, or if you're trying to like fill your opponent's graveyard to exile it with like Graveyard Trespasser and gain life. So I think Unseal the Necropolis is not bad because it does something that Cruelty of Gix has seen some play for doing, which is returning those Shieldreds from your graveyard to your hand, or any other creature that you lose. And this one still even sort of like acts as a sort of draw, because you get to look at the top 3 cards, milling them into your graveyard, and then picking a creature, potentially. So that's Unseal the Necropolis. Next up, we have Volcanic Spite. So for 2 mana, instant, Volcanic Spite deals 3 damage to target creature, planeswalker, or battle. You may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. If you do, draw a card. This card I am super excited for because 2 mana, 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker instants have, with like some sort of upside, have typically been playable. Think of a Braid, Cathartic Pyre. Those are good examples. Well, this one has the upside that it can also hit battles on top of creatures and planeswalkers, and then you also get to loot away a card, putting it on the bottom of your library and then drawing. So this is not as good as putting it into your graveyard. Something like Cathartic Pyre has two options. You can do 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and then the other option is you can cast it to discard up to 2 cards and then draw 2 cards. Um, those are like the modes on that. It's not as good as like putting things into your graveyard because graveyard you can do reanimator synergies. It's a little bit different than a Braid. A Braid can only hit creatures or it can destroy an artifact. I really like a Volcanic Spite here though because there's a bunch of expensive cards from March of Machines that you might want to be playing, but if you get them in your hand, that's really not good. So Volcanic Spite does 2 things at once. Not only do you get the removal mode, but you also get the fix your hand mode. You can put that 7-drop like Atali from your hand on the bottom of your library to go ahead and hopefully find something a little bit more playable in the moment. So I really love it, Volcanic Spite, for the hand fixing and removal together. Seed of Hope. This is 1 green, instant, mill 2 cards. You may put a permanent card from among the milled cards into your hand. You gain 2 life. Now, Seed of Hope, I think this card is very interesting because it's kind of like, you know, a green cantrip. Now, you gain 2 life, which is also interesting. It's nice, it's relevant. You know, there's a lot of aggro decks, but the fact that it only mills 2 cards and you can only put permanents in your hand is pretty limiting. You only put a card from the 2 milled, so like you could potentially just hard whiff on this if you put non-permanent cards in your library. Most likely you just like play this, you hit a land or you hit a creature, not bad. It is very interesting though that it is an instant because this opens up for the opportunities when you're playing green and you hold up a Tyvar stand, and then at the end of the opponent's turn they haven't done anything, they're tapped out, you cast Seed of Hope, you get to draw a card, gain 2 life, and you don't lose that like defensive capability of Tyvar stand, which is so essential because green like lacks ways to get back into the game. So you really kind of need every creature to stick. So being able to hold up protection and then potentially Seed of Hope seems like a very powerful play. Next up, Sunder the Gateway. 2 mana sorcery, choose 1. Destroy target non-token artifact or enchantment opponent controls, incubate 2. Again, we talked about incubate tokens. It's basically a token that has +1 counters. Equal to the number, and then you can pay 2 to transform it into a creature with power and toughness equal to the number of +1/+1 counters. Now, the second option is incubate 2, then transform an incubator token you control. This card seems awesome. Like, awesome particularly for Phyrexian, like, tribal decks, because it's enchantment, artifact removal, you get a creature regardless of whether or not you choose to remove or just make a creature, because you have basically an option to create a 2/2 Phyrexian or to destroy target artifact or enchantment and create a 2/2 eventually, because of the way Incubate works. Now, I think it's also really interesting the way the second part is phrased, because it says incubate 2, then transform an incubate token you control. So like you can go ahead and transform the biggest incubate that you have. There's not super huge ones, but if you're playing something like Glistening Dawn, which creates incubate tokens equal to the number of lands that you have, those might be pretty massive, and then if you can flip one of those, that's much more valuable than flipping your incubate 2 there. So it's very nice that it gives you that additional flexibility. Artifact and enchantment destruction with creatures also is just awesome. So Sunder the Gateway, awesome card. Next up, talking about doing good on either option, we have Traumatic Revelation. This is 2 mana, target opponent reveals their hand, you may choose a creature or battle card from among it. If you do, that player discards that card. If you don't, incubate 3. So this card is basically creature or battle discard at sorcery speed. Now, if you miss, or if the opponent, say they just have like a 1/1 in their hand. They have something really irrelevant in their hand. It says you may choose a creature or battle from it, so like you can just completely ignore that and create the Incubate 3. So if you don't find something that you want to have like the opponent discard, like say they have Atraxa in their hand, and you're like, well, you're not going to be hard casting this, so you can keep it in their hand. You can then choose to Incubate 3 instead, and then all you have to do is pay 2 more to flip it into a 3/3 Phyrexian. So a 4 mana 3/3 Phyrexian, not ideal, but that's this card at its worst. At its best, you remove whatever the opponent like has in their hand that they're hoping to play. There are some interesting battles. This card will depend on how good battles are, but still a very interesting card. This card that can hit creatures or battles, or like doesn't miss because it creates a 3/3 for Phyrexian for 4. And then lastly, the honorable mention, Corrupted Conviction. This card I wanted to bring up because it was a reprint. It's basically a reprint of Village Rites. So it's guaranteed to be pretty good. I don't know if you've ever played with Village Rites. But it's very nice because it's a 1 mana instant as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature, draw 2 cards. I mentioned this card sort of earlier on, where the ability for you to hold up this card while your opponent's like potentially going to remove something is awesome because they're like, oh, I'm going to remove your Shieldred, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to be down cards. Well, now you can turn that like creature that's already going to die into 2 more cards, which is super nice and a great way to keep up with your opponent and with the removal. You do have to hold it open though, but we are getting more sack synergies in the set, so Corrupted Conviction, definitely a card to watch out for. Just didn't put it in the main list of cards because, well, it's sort of a reprint. Now for the rankings, I have Surge of Salvation as number 1, very versatile protection spell. Volcanic Spite as number 2, nice removal that can also fix your hand. Sunder the Gateway is number 3, enchantment and artifact removal with body, not bad. 4, Invasion of Ergamon. This is that 2 mana ramp and fix your hand by discarding and drawing. Marshal of Zhalfir, Night Lord for 2. It's an uncommon as well, so everybody can feel free to craft it without worrying too much about wild cards. 6, we have Atraxa's Fall. This one's a bit more of a gamble here, but the amount of flying creatures makes the fact that you can pay 2 mana to remove a flyer very intriguing, and then you can just go ahead and hit those battles, those enchantments and artifacts. 7, Invasion of Pyrulea. This is my sleeper kind of pick from here. I think it's going to be pretty good. You can basically end up scrying 2 and drawing a land or a battle or another dual face card, so cool stuff. 8, Unseal the Necropolis. This is your recursion here, potentially hitting a creature from the milling, helping to fill those graveyards for Shieldred. 9, Botanical Brawler. You got your +1 counter stuff. 10, Render Inert. Flipping those battles, killing those planeswalkers, killing those incubates, and drawing cards, not bad. 11, Invasion of Amonkhet, again filling those graveyards, making the opponent discard, drawing a card, just good value. Doesn't necessarily impact the board, but good value is good value. 12, Seed of Hope, instant green, like cantrip sort of, mill, gain life, right? 13, I'm struggling here. Sandstalker Moloch. This is your 3 mana green hitting on blue and black. 4/2 flash creature, very cool. 14, Sculpted Perfection, your Phyrexian Anthem with sort of a body. 15, Khenra Spellslinger. That creature that flips into like double prowess is going to be very intriguing. 16, Blighted Burgeoning. You got your land enchantment ramp, which also creates a body. I'm very excited for this card. Maybe it'll perform even better than how I have it listed here. 17, we have Traumatic Revelation, battle and creature discard with a body potentially if it fails. 17, Cosmic Hunter, simply a bite that can also hit battles. 19, Cut Short, your white removal that I was talking about, that you can invoke potentially. And then 20, Final Flourish, that sack removal, instant speed. Could be interesting if instant speed allows you to sack a creature that's going to be removed anyways, and then remove the biggest thing the opponent has. So that's my quick rankings. If you want to know my thoughts on the Praetors, the Mythics, the Rares, consider checking out the videos in the description. And if you want to have a full like deep dive guide on the whole set, I did a video going over the entire set. There's timestamps in the description so you can hop around if you're interested. Should be on the screen now. Have a nice morning, evening, night, afternoon, wherever and whenever you're watching. Ciao.